If your plane crashed right here, no one would find you in time. Not because there's no signal, not because no one's looking, because the nearest human being isn't in another city or another country. They're in space. Right now, astronauts on the International Space Station are closer to this spot on Earth than any person standing on solid ground. This is the most remote place on the planet. And commercial airlines go out of their way, literally reroute entire flight paths to avoid it. Here's why.
Somewhere in the South Pacific, roughly halfway between New Zealand and South America, there's a point in the ocean called Point Nemo, named after Captain Nemo, the submarine captain from Jules Verne's novels, whose name literally means no one in Latin. It's officially known as the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, the single point in the ocean that is farther from land than anywhere else on Earth. To put that in perspective, the nearest land to Point Nemo isn't a city. It isn't even really an island most people have heard of. It's a scattering of tiny, uninhabited rocks over 2,600 kilometers away in every direction. That's roughly the distance from London to Moscow, except instead of land, in every direction, it's just water. And this single fact changes everything about how planes are allowed to fly near it.
Here's something most passengers never think about. Every commercial flight path over open ocean is governed by a rule most people have never heard of, called ETOPS, Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. In plain English, if a plane has an engine failure or a fire or a medical emergency mid-flight, it needs to be able to reach a suitable airport within a set amount of time, usually somewhere between 180 and 370 minutes, depending on the aircraft. Near Point Nemo, that math falls apart. The nearest usable airstrips are so far away that a plane flying directly over this region could be 5 or more hours from any runway capable of an emergency landing. For most twin-engine aircraft, which make up the vast majority of the global commercial fleet, that's simply outside the safety margin. So instead of a straight line, airlines plan wide, curving routes around this stretch of ocean, even though it adds flight time and burns more fuel. It's cheaper and safer to go around than to risk being stranded in the one place on Earth where help genuinely cannot reach you fast enough.
But aviation isn't the only industry that treats this spot with extreme caution. It's also where space agencies dump dead spacecraft. Since the 1970s, more than 250 decommissioned satellites, cargo ships, and space station modules have been deliberately crashed into the ocean near Point Nemo, including massive Russian Progress resupply vehicles and, eventually, the International Space Station itself when it's retired. Why here? Because when something falls from orbit, there's always a risk that debris survives re-entry and hits the ground. Point Nemo is so far from any shipping lane, any island, any human settlement that space agencies calculated it's the safest possible place on Earth for something to fall out of the sky. Which means this single patch of ocean is now doing double duty. It's a no-go zone for planes flying too close and a landing pad for humanity space junk.
Here's where it gets stranger. You'd think a spot this remote would at least be teeming with sea life, untouched by humanity. It's almost the opposite. Because Point Nemo sits so far from any coastline, it's also far from the nutrient-rich currents that flow off continental shelves. Ocean currents here rotate in a massive, slow gyre that traps warm, nutrient-poor water in place. Scientists studying the region have found that it has less marine life than almost anywhere else in the ocean, in some ways more comparable to a desert than to the rich reefs closer to land. So this is a place where, if your engine failed, you couldn't reach an airport, rescue ships couldn't reach you quickly, and even the ocean itself has less life in it than almost anywhere else on the planet. It's not just remote from land, it's remote from everything.
Now here's the part that surprises most people. Despite everything you just heard, planes do still fly over this region. Not directly through the most extreme dead center point, but close to it, on certain long-haul routes between South America, Australia, and New Zealand. Airlines don't ban the area outright. What they do is much more calculated.
They plan the timing and routing so that even in a worst-case scenario, the aircraft is never more than its certified ETOPS limit from a viable diversion airport, even if that airport is a tiny airstrip on a remote island thousands of kilometers away.
In other words, this isn't a mysterious no-fly zone marked in red on a map. It's a place where the entire flight plan, fuel load, backup routing, even which specific aircraft gets assigned to the route, is built around the fact that if something goes wrong here, you are further from help than a human being has ever been in the history of aviation. And there's one more detail that makes it even stranger. Because of how remote this spot is, for years, the closest human beings to anyone flying over it weren't on any ship or any island. They were the astronauts aboard the ISS, orbiting roughly 400 kilometers overhead, physically nearer to this point than any person on Earth's surface.
There's something unsettling about a location like this existing on a planet we think of as fully mapped, fully covered, fully within reach. We assume that no matter where you are, help is a phone call away. Point Nemo is a quiet reminder that isn't true. There is still a place, a real, specific set of coordinates where the ocean is so wide and the land so far that you would genuinely be more alone than anyone else who has ever been alive. And every single day, without most passengers ever knowing it, commercial pilots are quietly routing thousands of feet above it, working around a limit most of us will never think twice about.
So the next time you're on a long flight over the Pacific, glance at the map on the seatback screen. If your route curves slightly instead of cutting a straight line across the ocean, there's a real chance that curve exists because of a single point thousands of kilometers away, a point named after a fictional submarine captain surrounded by less life than a desert, used as a graveyard for the same spacecraft. It's the most remote place on Earth, and it's shaping flight paths you've probably taken without ever realizing it.
If a single point in the ocean can quietly reroute global air travel, imagine what else is hiding in plain sight on the map. Subscribe for more of these, and let me know in the comments, would you fly directly over Point Nemo if you could?